Hello guys, welcome to another NASCAR Thunder 2004 modding video. I have fantastic news, which is that I've figured out a way to swap car textures in NASCAR Thunder 04 for the PS2 emulator, which does require a custom build and did require me writing custom code. So sharing this is going to be a little tougher, or a little funky, but you're going to have to run off of a certain build of the PS2 emulator. That probably means Windows only. I'm going to go over a little bit of the basics of how we got here, some of the fun things I found along the way, and a little bit of what I'm going to be giving you guys tool-wise moving forward. In the meantime, though, the main objective of this video is to grow the community real fast. we are going to need painters. Simple as that. We're going to need painters because, you know, it's been years and people are still painting new cars for other sims, you know, and different paint schemes that have been overlooked. And now we're trying to basically start from the ground up because we have a different car model with a different car texture. That said, though, I do think anything that works with NASCAR sim racing should be very quickly and easily portable over to NASCAR 2004. And or anything that worked with the PC version of 2004. Don't quote me on the sim racing part. I think that will work. I believe it uses the same models as 2004. But either way, the PC version of 2004 should use the same exact car models and texture layout. So we should be able to port those over. But regardless, I know that was a very, very small community and a lot less painters and people involved than, you know, the NR 2003 and iRacing communities are, obviously. I don't expect to grow to a community of that size, but I do hope that we can get some painters going, because the main reason I'm not waiting longer to do this video is because if I release it and I have no paint schemes custom made, then, you know, the tools are going to be scattered, everybody's going to be painting their own stuff, might lose interest before they get done a whole car set. I want to get the people that are enthusiastic about this, that like to paint or know how to do paint schemes or have done paint schemes and have templates laying around where they could just rework them, you know, grab logos and decals and all that stuff and rework it to NASCAR Thunder 04. Those are the people that I am looking to help get the ball rolling here so that we have a bit more of a core to build from than just, hey, I have this tool that lets you swap textures. I want to start getting some templates going and stuff like that with you guys. Linked in the description are a couple of items that you'll need. I linked one of each car body type. They are just scaled up manually. They're you know, they're not pretty, they're not sharp, but they're scaled up versions of the cars in game. You know, the 4 different body types. Any painters can start making templates off of that, but please note there is a section of this video where I'm gonna show you about the windshields and how that's a little funky. We can't do transparency in any of our replacement textures. I know the core game has some semi-transparent and transparent textures, but we can either do full color or no color, like either fully transparent or fully opaque. There's no real in-between for replacement textures, unfortunately. So some things are going to be a little limited for us, but it is not out of the realm of having some fun-looking paints and custom paints and everything else we want here. Something else I found while trying to mess with textures and all that stuff, I found the Allies and Rival screen car textures, and I actually found a few placeholder ones that you can see here that are pretty interesting, because I don't think anybody's ever actually noticed these before, but I noticed that with modding Tony Raines into the game, it seemed to show his Ally and Rival texture, which was weird because I don't remember changing that value. So it must have been linked to his driver ID, which still existed. But there's also a Menard actual full paint scheme in there for the Rival screen, and placeholders for Bodine and Hideo Fukuyama, which was really cool. I just wanted to share that as a little tidbit of fun things I found while working on all this stuff. As you guys can see here, I have a completely custom Pontiac paint scheme. This is based on my real dirt car. It was something I have files laying around for, so I painted it up. I don't have the files for the back, unfortunately, so I didn't quite finish that. But I just painted up a mock-up of my car and threw on some actual decals from Pontiac stuff and a little bit of shading from some NR 2003 templates. I don't have shading down the door, but honestly, this game does a decent job of lighting and shading that even paint schemes that don't really have much of that to them naturally, the game's actually pretty good at putting those on. You can see there's a higher res wheel here on the loading screen as well than normal. And you can see that this texture is a lot clearer than these. It is higher res. We can do that. So I'm going to go ahead and load up a track. I put the good place with traffic. Dover's a good place with traffic, I guess. Where can we play in traffic? I also made the pace car invisible at one point, and you totally can repaint the pace car. Ah, yes. So I have my custom interior on, so the graininess of my windshield is quite thicker than it was previously, but that's okay. I'm going to shut this off. But you can see from looking at the 25 car's wheels here, you can see that it's a different texture than the game's base texture. A little hard to tell with my custom ones, but it's there. So there you go. You can see the higher res texture. I didn't quite center them perfectly. That's going to take some, finesse on your part whenever you make custom textures. But you can totally line that up and get that looking a lot better than I did. We can customize the interior texture as much as we want. The only problem is the texture itself has this kind of film grain that goes on the windshield, which muddies it up. And because of the way the transparency doesn't work with custom textures with texture replacement, we don't have a good way of customizing that further. You're either going to have to deal with it being a thicker grain or potentially, granted, a whiter color, a clearer color might work. I haven't messed with this too much, but if you delete anywhere that would be solid, it'll be clear. But I had a weird side effect with the in-car view. When I deleted the windshield, as you guys will see, I had blurry cars and blurry grandstands, and everything in the distance is blurry. And this may be an issue that only I have or very few people have, because I have this same problem when I'm outside of the car. And I know quite a few people who play this game and have posted videos on the game don't have that issue. So I'm not actually sure what causes it. I'm not actually sure why mine's blurry. But I do know that if you leave that blank, it will be blurry. So we may have to mess with, whoever decides to customize some interiors and stuff. When you're messing with it, the area that is the windshield, that's dedicated to the windshield, you may have to mess with that a bit to get it to look right without making everything blurry and so on. Because I think the game does make it somewhat transparent anyway, even if the texture is solid there. It does seem to. I don't think that. I know that. But I haven't messed with doing different colors or anything yet. Also, for anyone wanting to customize the tires, the chassis, the engine, and so on, if you want to change that texture, that one's not too bad. I have that in the cars and interior. I have the textures themselves here. The ones that are numbered are the correct ones. I have different versions of the interiors here, but there's one file for the, nope, that's not the right one. That's actually for the car select screen. This file here is for the on-track stuff. So the bottom of the car is here, the engine is here, window net, stuff like that. The pace car wheels are here as well, both stationary and in motion. The racing tire in motion is here. The rim is here. So they all kind of get mapped a bit differently, but I messed around with it and I threw on the new wheel. I didn't make it blurry and whatever. So now you can see I swapped in the newer style rims, and again, I don't have them quite centered, but if you don't put the blurry spinning texture, what you'll have is this bit of an effect where they kind of spin in weird directions at different speeds, which is a little accurate if you had, you know, perfect vision going on, but it obviously doesn't look the greatest. It's a little distracting at times. Also, this one, I put there's stuff you want to do and stuff you don't want to do with these textures that I noticed. So you can see the wheel looks very flat. It looks very lacking in depth. Well, if I stop wrecking, you can see that it's lacking in a bit of depth in the wheel. And the reason for that is that in these original textures, they don't have the rim in any of these shots here, but they do over here. And I think the way they modeled it was as separate pieces. So there's just a basic disc that gets modeled outside for one of these two or both of them, I'm not sure. And then the inner rim has more detail to its 3D model. So by using a full texture here and a full texture here, it's not using the inner rim, the rim depth and the rim model. It's just plastering a texture outside. So that's why that looks a little weird and a little flat. So I think leaving these hollow is actually really important to get the textures really looking the way you want and the models looking the way you want. And I believe this actually might be the blurred rim texture. It does seem to be like a rim in motion here, even though they decided to go smaller with it for some reason instead of doing the same size. I guess they were trying to fit within a certain sheet size, but again, we can scale everything up so it looks crisper in this. I had a member from GBA Temp, which is a website that has a lot of texture customization and basic modding and texture swapping in it. A member of that was offering to do texture packs for different games, and I had him look into this one. And he does upscaling, and he uses a program to do it once he exports them, but he upscaled this texture to over here, and you can see it upscales. Most of the time it upscales okay. Like, these textures definitely look a heck of a lot better, but some things, especially text, will get upscaled weird. I don't have the base file here on me, but the Goodyear was kind of, looked a little funky, and different things can look a little funky. I mean, you can see this rim looks a little weird. It looks a little blobby. But regardless, I have those textures. I'm also going to offer part of this upscaling of those textures for you guys, so you can use them if you want. They're going to be in a separate folder, in a separate file. To replace those textures, you just have to go to your documents, PCSX2 textures, then SLUS-20824. That is the Nascar game, and then a replacements folder and whatever textures you want to have swapped in, as long as they're named correctly and either in this folder or in a subfolder beneath this level, they will get swapped. So you could go ahead and take that texture pack that I sent, the upscaled stuff, and place it here. If you don't like how it looks in the game, you don't have to use it. It does have a lot of... I tried to separate out the stuff for the car numbers and names, because a lot of that, again, it doesn't come out visually great. Some of the billboards and stuff may have logos that look a little funky. Anything small font wise will look a little funky, but everything else looks way crisper, way crisper, and I'll show you that real quick. So even things like the base in-game textures are affected by this. So if you look at the Race Now logo, for example, see how blurry that is now, and then how crisp it gets by enabling this. So even stuff like that will be affected. So even just the on-track textures, there'll be just subtle differences. Now, actually, it's more noticeable on the people in the infield than it is some of the on-track textures, but some of them being upscaled is a bit more subtle than others. The EA Sports logo on the wall there, for example, that's a little blurry. Actually, the Food City logo is a really good example. You see how blurry that is, and then when you load up the textures, it's a lot crisper. So this will affect everything in the game pretty much. It's not perfect. It's not 100% of everything, but it should be quite a few things. I'm getting run into. It's subtle, I think, for all the in-game stuff. You know, he used an auto upscaler. And remember, my interior is only messed up because of my custom texture. But even stuff like this tow truck, for example. See how blurry that is, and then crisp. So it makes a difference on a lot of things. You can see, though, like the bathrooms in the infield aren't affected by that. In this, it didn't get to be part of his export or part of my import, probably. But regardless, a lot of stuff is crisped up automatically without having to have somebody go through and customize every single texture, though that is entirely possible. One thing to keep in mind when doing pit boxes, things get mirrored. As you can see, I did this texture here, just put Joe Schmo on, just some text, generic text, and it flips it this way. Now the other side of the pit box, it is the correct way. Why they didn't just wrap this around twice and orient it the correct direction, I will never know. But because of that, we can't get... Let me just pause this. We can't get logos and things, fancy things on there on each pit box. However, we can do designs. So, or if you don't mind if it's mirrored in some places, you can use logos. But the problem is, the side of the box is also what's used for this box. So there's quite a few repeat areas. I think the only section that isn't repetitive is the TV box area and the tool area. But you can only really see that here, so it's not super... I mean, you could throw a logo there, maybe be something fun to put there, but that's the only section of the pit box that isn't looped that I'm aware of, and wherever the heck this is, but I don't even know where that is. But the section, the box itself, and the side of the box, that's reused in multiple spots. There's even a bit of, you can see there's text stretched here, so some of this actually ends up on the whole top of the box, and I'm not actually sure where exactly that is. You have to experiment to find out. This here is the low-res pit crew. It is not the same as the pit crew that comes over the wall, but it's just the guys that stand behind the wall. So the ones that come over the wall have their own texture set, which I've not mapped for every pit crew, mainly because one, it's super time consuming to do. Two, I'm mainly expecting people to play career mode with this. I don't expect people to be playing single races, or, well, I guess maybe you could play a season as somebody else, but you could kind of do that in career mode anyway. So I don't expect people to see the pit crews, because the only pit crew you see is your own. So there's kind of no point in me mapping all that out for all the cars, knowing how much time it would take. Rather just get this in your guys' hands faster with the important parts ready to go, plus a little bit of fun. Another thing to be aware of with the textures with the cars is that the windows need to have some transparency in them. Now the problem is, no matter whether you put semi-transparency on the textures, it will always come out as solid. The most you could do is just not have anything there where the window is. So I think the templates are going to be better off that way, unfortunately. Either that, or we'll have to use a texture where it appears like a window. But the problem is, it's not going to work great in races, because you won't be able to see through other vehicles and inside of other vehicles. So I think leaving them blank is better. And I'm going to show you what that looks like here. So you can see I actually have some transparency here in this texture, but it still shows up completely solid with whatever color it is. So it's the same thing as if you just did that, is basically what the game is going to interpret, or the emulator. But you can delete this and delete this, and we could still leave bars, solid bars, you know, the window outline, nice little details like that. But I'm going to delete these just to show you. Let me reload the textures. My car's going backwards. there. So you see it's now a transparent window there. And it's not great because there's no bars in the back. There is the front bar. There is the fin down the left side there, but there's no bar for each part of the window. But as I said, though, if you draw something here, it will render. So we can do textures with window details, but the window itself is going to have to be transparent. Now, the nice thing is the reflections and such still go off of the car model. So even if I deleted this entire texture and saved it, and let's reload it. There we go. So now my car is invisible somewhat. It still has reflections on it. It still has other details on it, but it's invisible to an extent. So at least it'll still look like there's a window there because of the reflections. So that's kind of nice. It's just unfortunate that we can't do any semi-transparency with textures in texture replacement. One thing to note with the hauler textures is as you can see here, the test text gets cut off after the E, comes back at the S basically, and the middle gets stretched of this texture. But it also gets mirrored and placed on the back. So this section of the texture is actually the back of the hauler as well. So you can go ahead and customize this section of it. It is squished left to right a little bit, but it's not too bad to figure out. The front of the hauler should be proportionate, I believe, and like I said, the sides a little bit squished, but you can work with the front of it. Designs over here are going to be tough. You can only really put a design on the front and the back, but know that it's going to be linked completely on the back of the truck. So there's a lot of reusing textures in Thunder 04. So there's going to be stuff like that all over the place. So essentially, when you want to make a pack for the game, when you want to make a texture pack, mod, whatever you want to call it, you're going to take this paint kit and you're going to create as many of these folders as you need. I would just say move these out. Well, I'll have better templates hopefully with the community build and stuff. But without these guys in here, you'll want all of the items available. And what you're going to do, let's say you want one paint scheme, you're going to title this one Car 1. If you want two paint schemes, you title it Car 2. You just save them as Car 1, Car 2, and so on. Now, keep in mind, in the new program, it says how many paints are available for each driver. Now, that's actually technically paint -1 for a lot of drivers. Bobby Labonte is a good example. He has a test car. The test cars never show up. So I actually don't have them in my program's lookup. So you're actually going to have paint schemes, essentially paint schemes -1 for most drivers is what you're going to have available. But again, I don't think we need more than one at any time because you can easily swap textures and reload the game just by renaming a couple of files. Actually, you don't even have to reload the game, you just have to reload the textures at the time. Now, what the program's going to do is you're going to name this folder the car number. So whenever you have this paint kit, let's just set something up here. So I have Seasons 1990. My new car number has to be the beginning of it. So this is actually wrong. So the naming format you're going to want to go with here, without spaces, is car number dash then their name. Now their name's going to have a space, but driver name. So car number dash driver name. You don't want spaces around the dash. You just want the car number dash and the driver name with spaces. The reason being, this is what my program's going to use to know where to allocate textures to and from. So what you're going to do in the editor, in this old editor, as you guys are probably a little familiar with. I did change a lot of things. Car make and model is a drop down. The UPS truck doesn't work. That's on newer. That's not in 04. It actually breaks some things. You could load it for fun and see what it does, but it breaks it. So one stat that I don't have control of in the game is variance. And I've sorted my list by this variance stat and essentially taken my roster and gone top down with my roster and entered their names where appropriate. So I'm using existing Cup drivers. You cannot use legends. They won't work in career mode. I have a locked fantasy stat here or name here. Don't use those either because the pace car won't load in career mode either. So as you can see, the Busch drivers, I've set them to fantasy. The reason being, the actual fantasy drivers have pit boxes and pit signs more often than the Busch drivers do. Some of the Busch drivers don't have pit signs. Dale Jr.'s being one of them. Harvick's is one of the few exceptions. His has a pit sign. Actually, it's literally just Harvick and Tina Gordon that have pit signs for some reason or another. I can even show you that here. So Tina Gordon has a pit sign. This is essentially that, and she has the car number texture and her car. But the 23B, as I labeled it, he doesn't even have his own car ID, his own car number. That one's shared with the 23 Kenny Wallace. It uses these. So a lot of the Busch drivers don't have much data to them. They use generic pit stalls for car number 101. So I actually think it's better to use the fantasy drivers than it is to use the Busch drivers. But essentially, again, I'm going variance. Drivers that are consistent at the top with the lower number. Then, when you get to the fantasy drivers, they're number 3. All the fantasy drivers are set to number 3 variance, which is good. So, because it's average, so it's good that there are a lot of entries with that. You could get most of your roster in there. The only thing you have to do a little funky is drivers you want full-time, you're going to set to Cup. Drivers you want part-time, you're going to set to Busch. And like I said, anything you're not using, make sure you set it to fantasy or leave it alone if it's already legend or something else. The part that gets extra frustrating, though, is not extra frustrating, but the part that gets a little more complicated is the portraits for the drivers. So if the driver you're replacing has a portrait ID over here, then you don't need to enter one over here. But all the fantasy drivers don't have portraits. Now you can easily use drivers you aren't using or portrait IDs that are not in the game naturally. And essentially what I did for this, and this is the file I'm going to give you guys, is a version of this. It might not have this roster. It probably have it might not have this roster, but I'm going to give you guys a sample file that will have portrait IDs mapped and Cup and Busch, all that stuff set to what it needs to be. So essentially, because there's only so many of these to go around, as you can see, I have drivers well beyond, and these all got set to 0 to clear them out because a lot of these guys have them. So, Rusty Wallace has a portrait ID. I'm replacing Rusty Wallace with Tommy Riggins. He's far enough back in points. I'm not going to do a portrait for him. Or if you don't do a portrait for any driver, if you do a texture pack without portraits, you can enter 0 for these. But essentially what I did was all of the drivers from here down, any of the texture IDs for the portraits, I essentially used those numbers up here and then made sure to replace these with 0s. So it gets a little complicated because I'm using Jeff Gordon's portrait for Mickey Gibbs up here. So it gets a little complicated there, but that's where my program comes in. So what my program is going to do is it's actually going to reference this sheet. So as long as you just put a number here for portrait ID, then my program will go ahead when you have a folder of 01-Mickey Gibbs, the portrait file in that folder, it's going to rename it so it replaces the portrait ID number 8. So it shouldn't be an issue with my tools. Like I said, the hardest part is going to be this, but I'm going to give you guys a file with all of them. So essentially, as long as you take your roster and you go top down, so like I did, I literally went like this and copied down and then just pasted as values. I'm not going to do it again because then you paste as values. The first 4 I'm keeping. You know what, I'll show you guys. I can undo it. Paste as values. Now, I'm only using the ones that have cup here. So what I did was then I copied all the way down, copy that to the next cup slot, delete everything above it. Make sure you do not cut and paste. Cut and paste will break formulas over on the side. Always copy and paste when using this sheet. So again, I'm only using these 2 for cup. So everybody else, I'd copy down, paste, delete those 2. Now I have Ricky Redden, Alan Quickie, and cup. And then Ernie Irvin on down. And you'd want to grab all the way to the bottom of your list. I'm just grabbing shallow just to show you guys the example. But you do that until you run out of drivers. Now, I've set drivers to cup beyond a certain number of starts to full time. So I ended up cutting it off. I have 33 drivers that are full time. The player will make 34. So there's 9 slots that will swap out between the rest of the drivers. So I stopped at Chad Little for this particular one because he had 18 starts. That was my weird cutoff. And then the rest of the cars that I have custom are Busch, and any cars that I'm not using are fantasy. Make sure you set them. So I even have cup drivers down here. What were cup drivers down here that I've set to fantasy now. So this will keep your roster pristine. This will keep your roster to be controlled to what you want. And you can change this if you want. I recommend now this one again, copying and pasting. If you want 5 more drivers to be full-time cup drivers, you just copy cup once, select the drivers you want, and paste it. If you want more of them to be Busch, you copy Busch once, and you paste it up here. And then you have less. Just to show you guys at the top for reference, I have number of full-time, number of part-time, number of fantasy drivers. That's based off of this column here where you manually set the series they're in. And this only overwrites the value that's over here. If you don't enter anything in this column, that's fine, except that drivers that are cup or Busch, you'll want to set manually to fantasy over here, because otherwise they will populate in your races if you're not using them. Their paint schemes are going to show up, their driver info, all that stuff. So this is just for your reference, so you can easily double check, hey, do I have too many full-time drivers? Because if you set, I actually don't know what happens if you set 50 drivers to full-time cup. I have no idea. I haven't tried it yet. That'll be something to experiment with. But regardless, this is a good reference, so you know how many full-time drivers you have, so you know that you are going to get some part-time guys in the mix. It's just for your own reference. You'll also want to make sure you set the car model for every driver. I've not done this yet. You're going to need to do this. The reason I didn't do this yet is because this is the 1990 roster, and I'm not sure which car models the templates are going to be placed on yet. I haven't decided yet. I might not even be the one doing it. One other thing I did on the paints tab, you'll see I have entered, I just have these copied over from here, the names and the paint year for each individual paint. If you want to change the names of them, I'm probably going to add a couple columns that reference the roster so that the paints table can tell you which car it is, so that you don't have to keep cross-referencing. I'll add those in. But then you could rename these cars to be whatever you want. So, you know, maybe this would be the Tide, well, not Pontiac back then. I think it was a Tide Lumina or something. You know, you could make these whatever you want them to be. You could change the year to be your correct season year. But the one reason I am really showing you guys this, or the extra reason I'm showing you guys this, since I only want one paint scheme per driver, I've set this up, and you can change this. If you guys don't want this, all you have to do is delete actually just this column here where the texture IDs are, and it'll use the other textures. So the way my program is going to work, I'm only going to do one car per one paint scheme per driver. So I have these copied over from that base texture, that base car. And I made sure these are correct. They should all be good. But that way in the game, no matter which paint scheme is picked for the 01, it's going to be the correct paint scheme that I have customized. Now, if you wanted them to have some variance in their paint schemes and you want them to use other paint schemes, anything except the test car will get auto-replaced by my program. So remember, on this page, let's find Jerry Nadeau. I think he's down the bottom here. I don't think I'm actually using him, but just for reference. It says number of paints, 4. Now that's slightly incorrect, as I mentioned, because it's including the test car. So my program will have a maximum of 3 paints for Jerry Nadeau. So in your folder, in your paint kit folder, if this was Jerry Nadeau's folder, for example, you could do car 1, car 2, car 3. If you do car 4, it's going to ignore it. It's not going to do anything with it. But car 1, 2, and 3, what it'll do is in that order, it will replace it. Car 1 will go here. Car 2, actually, I'd have to check these, but I have to update the data. Car 1 will go here. Car 2 will go here. Car 3 will go here. It ignores the test cars. I'll probably mark these in red just so it's more obvious to you guys by the time I release this. Just make sure if you do more than one paint scheme for a driver that you get rid of these texture ID replacements over here, because the final texture ID will update over here, and that's if you're not replacing them. I mean, you could even mark them blue so you know that it's not replaced, but I'm doing just one paint scheme per car. I think it's simple enough, or more than good enough for how I'm planning on using this. And you could even do it where you do a texture pack that is an individual race event and then load a new texture pack in for the next event by doing it this method. And then you could get specifically the real paint schemes they had per individual event if you wanted. But I just wanted to note that, and also if you change the name of this one, it'll change the name of the rest of them. They're currently linked, but if you decide to customize them, you literally just type over them and it will replace it in that spot. Simple enough. Schedule hasn't changed. That's as it's been. The data tab hasn't changed, but I do have a new sheet for you guys for. So there's going to be a separate file that has 2 different tabs on it: data template, raw data. The data template is going to look very familiar. It's literally the same as the other sheet. You don't even technically have to enter anything in this one. This is just here if you wanted to lay it out. As far as, well, you don't have to enter anything in this section anyway. You can do that on the other sheet, the main file. The things you will want to do here, though, is you're going to want to copy, you're going to want to put your schedule here. Everything to the right, you can leave alone right now. And the reason being, I'll show you in a minute. So you're going to enter your schedule here, and you're going to go over to raw data. And down at the bottom, I use racing reference. So let's load this up here. So what you're going to do is go to racing reference for all the race results you want. You're going to select from position all the way down to the end of the points there, the end of the results. You go back to your template, and these should already be empty. Just clear those out real quick. What you're going to do is right at position at the top, you're going to right click and you're going to paste match destinating format. That's going to go ahead and put all of the race information down here, the names and sponsors and stuff, just as it's it's straight from Racing Reference. But that's automatically going to update these stats up here. Starting position, name, laps led. And this name will be stripped of, you'll see it put a space in front of the name. It'll have those removed. So it should match your data template, whatever names you have here. Now, what you then end up doing, see, this already references that sheet. So what you end up doing in your main file is, once you've imported all the results, you'll go over to the schedule here, and either from the schedule over or just from this group over. I actually recommend doing the schedule separate because you really only want these two values. You don't want this column because that's calculated. In case you change your schedule, then it'll all be good. But essentially get your schedule over in the main file as well, and you're going to actually copy the results. So I recommend clicking in the first cell right here. This number, for me, it's number 4. It's going to be wherever they started for the first race. If you hold Control and Shift, and then you press the right arrow and once, and then you press the down arrow once, that should give you, as long as you had a consistent field size for the whole season. If you didn't, then you want to hold Shift and go further down, and you can even just do that with this. It's totally fine. And then copy with Control C, then go over to your full template, and from that first cell, you're going to right click and you're going to paste values, and that's going to overwrite this. And I know it's going to show some broken ones where you don't have results, and that's fine, but these results are now here. I'd have to update this schedule. It's not updated, but if I entered that roster, this roster is from 1990, so this is a bad example, and this results from 2003. But it's going to be based off of those stats. So as you can see, Michael Waltrip did run that season, so he is here. Sterling Marlin, Kyle Petty, so on and so forth. So their stats still calculate correctly. So that's all you have to do. Now, that does get rid of my calculated fields here. These are just the actual values that were present over here. These are calculated, as you can see, but when you paste values, they're not calculated anymore, which is fine because you shouldn't be changing these after the fact anyway without using this template. By doing it this way, by having the raw data down here for each race, that should make this a lot easier. Your process should essentially look like this. We copied Daytona, we go to next race results. I don't know why this page loaded offset. There we go, that's more like it. And copy the next race results, paste them, matching the destination, again on the position. Next race results, again, I don't know why it's offset. Click and drag down. Go back over to this program, match destination format. Oh, you guys can't see that. Match destination format in the right click menu in the paste options. And you just do that for every single race on the schedule. It's a little tedious, but honestly, this is about as easy as I could have made it. And you do that for every race, and it will automatically update up here, and it'll automatically update on your data template over here. Again, the whole process is going to be entering your schedule and the track types, then going over to raw data and going down to here to see your schedule itself and the actual race results, copying them from Racing Reference, pasting them by matching the destination format, and you just go across and you do that for every race in the schedule, and eventually there will be some data. You'll see, if you see a 0 here, whoops, you see a 0 here, then that means that race, that's the end of your schedule. So Homestead's my last race, the next one's 0. So as long as you see the track name you're looking for, then you should be good. But just paste the results across to each one, making sure you start with the position. And once you've done that, it automatically updates this up top. You don't need to change anything up here. This is all automatic. And that automatically updates these cells over here. And then once you're done doing all the results for the whole season, again, you just go under the start here. You select the first cell underneath that. Hold Control and Shift both. Press the right arrow once. Press the down arrow once. And if for some reason you have more than 43 entrants in your races, you just hold Shift and you click further down the list until you know, like, hey, the most entries we had for one race way back in the day was like 60 or something. I don't know. Whatever results you're going off of. Maybe you're going off something non-NASCAR even. And you copy that. And then you go over to your full modder, which is the one with the roster, paint schedule, all that stuff. And on your data tab, you go to that first one underneath the start, you right click and you hit paste values. And then you can see it brought in the new results, and everything will get calculated over here automatically. As you can see for Rusty, he has stats. He has more stats now. Reference tab is the same as it was before. The only thing you really should be changing over here is your percentage for the races and your driver information. So the year, birth year, rookie year, first name, last name, the town. Again, I recommend for career mode that we do custom values for this that are close to the year. I haven't tested it yet. We'll find out for next time, but I'm not sure if the starting year affects the calculation for birth year, rookie year. I'm not sure which way that calculates. It probably does. I haven't tried it for retirees to see what it's based off of. But you can go ahead and enter all that information for all your drivers that you're going to have. So Jimmy Means, Rob Moroso, so on and so forth. They're just entered down here with generic data for the moment. You can enter a town and name and state name. You don't have to. It's not pertinent, but it is if you want it there for their stat sheet to say the right thing, then you can go ahead and enter all that information as well. Everything else on this reference sheet you should not need to touch or look at for that matter. I could have hidden it somewhere else, but I'm just going to leave it where it is because a lot of things are linked up to it. So really, again, just your stat modifier and your driver information. And if you enter stuff down bottom, so if you enter new names down here and nothing happens on the left, make sure you select the last cell that worked and you click and drag this box down to the bottom, and it should then combine the names. If you don't leave any spaces, you could actually just double click that little box in the corner and it'll automatically go to the based on how many things are filled out, it should go down to the bottom automatically. Alright, that's it for the tutorial portion of how to actually use all the tools. Again, I will release the final tool once it's done. It's going to be probably a couple weeks, or at least 1 week, probably 2. But I wanted to get this video up because I wanted to give you guys time to start making templates, start making paint schemes, because that's something I am not good at. I'm okay at it, but it takes me way too long to do, and I do not have time for that. I know you're probably thinking you had time for this, but I did, but I don't have the patience nor the time for all the paint schemes, especially because I personally want to go back and start the career mode in 1990, whereas I think most people are going to want a correct roster for 2003 or a modern roster like today's roster and stats or last year. So there's going to be a lot of different wants from the community, but over time we can get them all covered. It's just a matter of getting people on the same page. That said, I have reached out to I have reached out to someone who made a lot of paint schemes for the early 90s for NASCAR 2003 and has done some iRacing paints, and I was going to see if he would be gracious enough to, for a price I'm willing to pay, to get the raw data that he, his layered templates of each car, of each paint scheme. Because, yeah, we could grab off of the final file, but that's not nice, nor fun, nor easy, because he has shading and everything else going on, and, the fender might cut off a logo differently, stuff like that. So, still would take a lot of recreating, but if he's, if anyone's willing to share their layered files for paint schemes they've made for different seasons, that's super helpful. And that's, I want you guys to do that in the Discord. I want you guys to be open to that. I know, as someone who used to paint, I fully understand not wanting to share your hard work and effort in a raw form that somebody could easily manipulate or use for something else. But considering majority of this is recreating real paint schemes, I really think, it'd be great for our community to be a bit more open to such things so that we can get more cars and more full rosters faster. And I don't mind if somebody puts together a paint set for a certain year and they don't want to bother with doing the stats and doing the setup for the game. I'm totally fine doing all that part of it. If they want to do just the paint schemes, I can do the rest. It may, I might not include driver portraits. It all depends. I know that's kind of a pain to do if you want portraits accurate to the time period, but that's another route we can take. Thank you guys so much for the support. I know this has been growing pretty quickly, and people are hearing about it more and more, and have been really anxiously awaiting updates. And I have to ask to be a little bit patient yet. The big part is getting paint schemes done. I feel like I can try to get this application done for you guys in a similar amount of time as the community should make some templates and start making paint schemes. I don't think I think we'll end up waiting on paint schemes more than we're going to be waiting on my tools. I think my tools will be done before somebody has a full set done, unless they're trying to beat me to the punch, which is fine. If you want to make it a race, I'm cool with that. But thank you guys so much for supporting. Join the Discord. I'm gonna be posting a lot of stuff there. If you want to support my efforts, it has been a long, tedious process and a lot of learning and messing about, and it's been a time. But if you want to support me and my efforts in some way, shape, or form, I did release a video game on Steam called Die Cook. It is a little restaurant management game. It's only $10. You could go buy that if you want to support me with something small. If you'd like to donate, I'll leave a link in the description. I know a few people were asking for that. That's the only reason I'm bringing it up, guys. That and the Discord is my game development Discord, so it's going to have stuff for my game projects. And I do plan on making a racing adjacent game eventually, but that's a whole other story and a whole other can of worms that we're not going to get into. So thanks again, guys. Have a good day.